All right, Lay, you could start us off by going over the consent.
All right, howdy y'all. My name is Lay. I am the Community Volunteer Ambassador for the park. I'm going to go over the general consent statement, and here I am sharing my screen. So as a visible disclosure, we'd like to inform any participants that any and all the Zoom series is and will be recorded. The purpose of this is to provide the Zoom series to those who participated or missed out on the session. It has also provided the information for participants to refer back to. In addition to the visible disclosure, this statement will be orally stated at the beginning of each Zoom series, like I am right now. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Yay. Thanks, Lay. All right, so I am going to start, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us today with the first Spider series. Just to remind everybody, if you don't mind muting yourselves, and then we'll hold for questions either in the chat room. Lay's going to keep an eye on the chat while I present, or I could answer any questions at the end of the presentation. So again, if anybody misses out or if they have to leave early, that's fine. The whole session will be recorded and we'll be able to share that link to you later on this week. So for those of you who may not know me, I'm Razsa, and I've been with the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area for a while, since 2008. And if you caught me on the Critter Corner presentation, you would have learned that I grew curious about spiders while working at the visitor center, and I've just become really intrigued by them, and I've had a grown appreciation for them as well. So today we're actually going to go over silk that they create. I'm going to share my screen with you all, and let's see, it might take a second. There you go. So we're going to talk about silk today. And if you ever heard of the song Salt and Pepper, this song usually says something more about mating, but I decided to change it up a little. So we're going to talk about silk. We're going to talk about webbing and some of the good things that they use silk for and some of the bad stuff they use silk for. So that's just a generalization of that. We know that silk, especially spider silk, if you compare a drag line of a spider silk, which is probably one of the strongest form of silks that they could create, is a drag line, because they need it to be strong enough to like drop themselves or pick themselves back up. And when they compare that to Kevlar and steel, scientists found out that it's actually 5 times stronger than steel within the same diameter. And so because of that, scientists are more intrigued by it and seeing how they could reproduce it and use it for modern technologies. And we'll get more deeper into that later on. Spiders cannot have silk without these little appendages at the bottom of their abdomen. So depending on the species, some species can have anywhere between 2 pairs of spinnerets or up to 8. And basically these appendages at the end are almost like little fingers that pull out or help maintain the silk and adding it to surfaces. And basically these spinnerets actually move. So they almost look like little fingers right at the end, moving the silk around. Silk is made of proteins and different amino acids inside their abdomen. Basically, they're their own chemists. They could produce up to 7 different types of silk, depending on the spider species. So I know the orb weaver family, I think they could produce up to 4 different types of silk, depending on what their needs are. And then we also have, when silk is exposed, it's actually a liquid form, so it doesn't solidify until oxygen actually hits it. Spiders could vary the thickness and the thinness depending on what their needs are. And I don't know how else to demonstrate that other than if you're trying to excrete spit from your mouth. If you want it more watery, you're gonna use the glands in the back of your mouth to make it more watery. And if you want it more of a thick, I hate to gross you out, but you think of a thick loogie. So those are ways that I try to imagine how they create the silk and excrete it that way. All right. We got some latecomers, but we're barely starting. And let me admit some folks in real quick. Sorry about that, folks. All right. So the most common way we see spiders using their silk is, the most common is their shelter. So this is an orb weaver web. So a lot of folks say this is like the Charlotte's web. So you see this round web in gardens, and this is the most common for their homes. But not all spiders use webs like this for their homes. Some of them use, depending on the species, ground spiders, they'll use dens, and they'll line them up around their dens and insulate on the inside as well. And trapdoor spiders as well will use the silk and actually make their own little cement. They'll excrete it and mix it with the soils, and they create these really interesting tunnels with doors. And the most common we see at our park as well are funnel web spiders. So again, they funnel it all the way down to the end where they're safe at the narrow end, and then the exposed areas where they're gonna wait for their food most of the time. Some spiders will, like I said, they won't live in dens or they won't live in webs in themselves, but they'll find corners, nice little nooks and crannies, and then they'll just make a wall of silk of a small web, and they'll create their home that way. I've actually seen jumping spiders in our brochure boxes at Circle X and Palo, and I think Zuma. And it's neat. They take a small little corner, and they'll make a small little wall out of silk, and that's where they hide and hang out. And so of course, let's see, all spiders actually have to use silk to wrap their sperm into a small package. So I guess a gift of life, right? So he could deposit it later during copulation. And the majority of spiders actually are cannibalistic, and the females will eat the males after mating. So it's not just the black widow. The majority of spiders will do that. And so they've grown smart and realized that they could use this silk to create a nice sturdy package, and they could use that in performing their copulation. Some spiders have gotten really smart, and they've actually wrapped insects, so food, and they'll approach the female spider with this gift of food in hopes that she'll eat that instead of them, and then they could copulate. And some female spiders will actually use the silk, and they'll actually create a drag line from their web or their den, and they'll place pheromones. However, not all spiders use pheromones to attract a male, but they have seen it in some of the garden spiders and crab spiders that they'll use a pheromone to attract a male to them. And what I thought was the most interesting, not to get a little kinky here, but scientists have found male nursery spiders will use silk to tie up their mate before copulating to avoid being eaten. So again, silk has been used as a tool that they use for mating. And I got this short little clip here, and it's interesting. So pay attention. You'll see him tie her up, and then you will actually see him with one of his appendages, his leg, go in and insert his package into her abdomen. So we'll give that a little play here. All right. And you might have to adjust the volume on your computer, just a heads up.
What you're looking at is a male nursery web spider wrapping a female with silk. Why? Because life's not easy when you're a small spider and your mating partner wants to eat you. So these male nursery web spiders have found a workaround. As University of Nebraska researchers captured on video, to avoid getting eaten, many of these spiders tie females with silk prior to copulation. Once the female is restrained, the sperm transfer begins. And when it's over, the male better retreat fast. Research team published results from their study in biology letters and noted males capable of silk wrapping were less likely to be cannibalized during or following copulation and had more opportunities for sperm transfer. What you're looking at is a male nursery website.
So another way is, let's see, somebody's not muted. So another way they use silk is they create nurseries. So majority of the females will create nurseries, and obviously they'll create egg sacs to hold the eggs. And so this is a nursery web spider on the left. She has her spiderlings right here. And also on the right, you'll see some eggs, and on the top, you'll see the male hanging out and the female. There is one particular spider where the male actually sticks around and he becomes a single dad, and he actually cares for the spiderlings. And I think that species is called, it starts with an M. Let's see. Manogean poracea. I hope I'm saying that right. And so those males, the scientists have found out, they will actually stick around and rear the young until adulthood, and the females actually disappear and they go on their own. So it's interesting to see the different dynamics there. But obviously the silk is being used to create nurseries, but also to host egg sacs as well. And obviously we know they use them for prey and snares, webs, and all that. So I have some images here to demonstrate that. Hold on, somebody needs to be admitted. So we do have trapdoor spiders at our park, and they will create a silk door. And like I said in the other previous slide, they'll mix it with soil and it becomes this really hardened tube and tunnel. And tarantulas do this as well. They'll line their dens with a thick sheet of silk, and they'll line the outer part of it as well. So when they sense any small vibration of an insect nearby, they're able to ambush their prey and kill them and eat them. What I found interesting was scientists have discovered that these ground spiders and tarantulas and trapdoors will actually also use the silk to help moderate their temperature and the humidity in their dens and their homes. And even sometimes it will help them avoid flooding. So they use silk in that sense as well. These spiders, like I said, the genetic spider, depending on the way the web is facing, it gives you an idea how these spiders are using the web for protein. So if you find a web that is more of a vertical sense, they're trying to catch insects that fall into their nets or in their webs, and they'll get their food that way. And if they're more of a horizontal, they're actually more enticed to catch or intercept flying insects that way. So it's interesting that they know directional uses of making webs and how to catch what kind of prey they will go for. So this is the purse web spider, and this is interesting. If you look closely on tree bark, they're most notably found in Kansas, but they are also found all over the United States. In between the grooves of the tree bark, they have these camouflage tubes made out of silk, and the actual spider lives inside of it. And once they sense the insect on the outside, they'll attack them from the inside, and they'll eat their morsel that way. And then then they actually repatch the hole that they made, and they'll hide all over again. So you really have to keep an eye out because they're so small, and the debris and the dirt really helps it camouflage its way. And again, it's easy for insects just to walk on it thinking that it's bark, when in actuality it's silk that they're walking on. Certain spiders will use web to create strong nets. So in this image, you'll see the spider has a drag line, so it lowers itself. And again, that drag line is going to be the strongest part of silk that they create, because it needs to be sturdy enough to hold their body weight and use it in that way. And the net, they'll actually wait for insects to go underneath them or walk by, and they basically use it as a net, and they'll just throw it onto their prey and wrap it around and envelop them that way. And this one's my most adventurous. It's a triangle weaver, and this is an interesting method. We'll create this web of silk in a triangular fashion, and then he or she is gonna hang out on the other end, and that he's actually gonna pull this string taut. And the reason for that is the minute he senses the vibration of an insect being caught, he's gonna let go and slingshot himself into this net and envelop his meal that way. So these guys are a little bit more adventurous in catching their prey. And I've always said this at all of my spider and tarantula programs, is that spiders do not shoot silk like Spider-Man. And just recently, scientists have discovered that there is one particular spider that does shoot silk. And they caught it, they studied it, and the reason for it is they actually shoot silk not at smaller prey, but at their predators that are bigger than them, in hopes that they could wrap them up and eat them in return. So this is a small footage of it. They don't do any slow motion, so you really have to pay attention and see how it shoots the silk at its enemy. But it does show a few clips over and over again, so you could catch one of them, but just pay close attention. And when I send the email out of the video, I'll actually add these videos from YouTube and National Geographic, so you guys can watch them at your own leisure. So here we go. So if you can, I think you guys can raise your hand, but just by so far of us talking or me presenting, how many of you think spiders can fly? I'll put you in gallery mode. So you could raise your hand physically, or you could use the tool at the bottom of your screen where the 3 dots are at, participants. If you think spiders could fly. I got a thumbs up from Ralph. Okay, I'm guessing that's a yes. OG says yes, okay. All right, so depending on how you interpret it, and I don't know why it's doing that. I would say, personally, that they can fly. They don't have wings, but they find other means of flying. And what happens is, usually spiderlings, when they're small, they don't want to stick together. Spiders are naturally cannibalistic and they'll eat each other. So they have to venture off and they're territorial, so they got to be solitary. And so what happens is these spiderlings, when they're small, they will excrete a certain type of silk. And even some spiders have learned how to, I don't want to say sew, but they connect the silk in such a way it creates a triangular shape as a sail. And so the wind's able to pick them up and take them other places. And scientists have studied some species and have learned that some of them could fly or balloon or kite as far away as 3 to 5 to even 10 miles away. So they're able to habitat in another territory and live, or go from another area, So, and it makes more sense because when you start walking on trails and you start seeing these huge webs in the middle of the trail, you have to wonder, how do they get from that leaf and across the trail to the other tree? And so they really use silk and wind into mastering their architecture there. So this video is really interesting. It shows, I think they focus more on crab spiders and how they use the silk to balloon or kite with the air. So they can fly, depending on that. And because of that, scientists are just so intrigued by spider silk. They do know about silkworms and how they create it. But they soon realize that they cannot harvest or farm spiders like they can with silkworms. Because again, they're cannibalistic, they'll eat each other. And I think there was an early study going on where they had over 30 spiders in a farm, and within a week, it was down to 1. And they couldn't figure out why, and then they soon realized that they are cannibalistic and they will eat each other. And that's why they have to study the spider silk and figure out its biochemical compounds and create biosynthetic silk for that reason. Spider silk has antibacterial components on it as well. It's biocompatible and it's actually biodegradable. So it's really, scientists really see that as a fortunate way to use in future medicines, and even the military is interested in its physical attributes, especially that it's so strong, stronger than steel. They're learning how, I think it's Kiag Labs, is learning how to produce biosynthetic silk into creating what they call is dragon silk, into creating bulletproof vests. Unfortunately, it's not at their mark yet. The vest that they've created so far for military testing, it slows down the bullet, but it doesn't stop it yet. So they're near a breakthrough, but they're still working on it. And again, what the military and maybe law enforcement aspect of it, they look into it, it's lighter in weight. It's more lightweight. It's easier to maneuver in. And the fact that it could stop bullets would just make their work a lot easier and more efficient, especially if they're out on war or out in the field. As far as medical applications, scientists are trying to use it for regeneration of tissue. So they're not using silk to become the tissue. What they're using the silk is to create a scaffold around the tissue that needs to be regenerated. And because again, the silk is it's almost like an antibiotic, but it also biodegrades. So once the tissue is able to regenerate itself, the silk can disappear and biodegrade into the human body without causing harm. And so they're looking at it as far as that for tissue regeneration. Drug delivery, that one caught my eye and peaked just because I was thinking more of like injections, but it's more of I think internal. So for example, folks who unfortunately have cancer and have to undergo chemotherapy, the drugs that they take do attack the cells of cancer, but unfortunately some of the side effects is it also attacks the healthy cells, and those individuals might be injured by any toxicity in that way, and that's why it's such a high risk. So they're hoping using spider silk, they could create something that can target just solely the cells that need to be attacked. And because it has those biocompatible components and antibiotics and it's biodegradable, it won't harm anything else around it. So scientists are still trying to figure out how to use that as far as medical applications. And so that's why these guys are geniuses, I think. Does anybody have questions? And if you do, you may have to unmute yourself. No? So again, you might have to mute yourself. Everybody's good.
Guys, I can't remember. I think there was one training session where you covered spiders, scorpions, but I can't remember. Are tarantulas considered spiders?
Yeah, so they're part of the megalomorph family. So basically, megalomorph means giant spider. So they are considered spiders.
But they don't have silk, right?
They do have silk, and they'll use it for dens, and some, depending on certain tarantula species, the males, when they get to a female den, he'll put out a drag line and pluck it, creating not music because they can't hear, but they sense the vibrations of it. So he'll pluck that string to try to entice her to come out so he can mate with her. So they do use silk for that purpose, and they actually use silk to create the egg sac as well.
Razsa?
Yeah.
The trapdoor spiders, do they make the cavity, or do they just like move into something that's already there, like a snake hole?
I think both. I'm not too sure about trapdoors, but I did read that like huntsman spiders and other ground spiders will dig. And I've even seen tarantulas dig, especially my tarantulas. I'll mess up their home and their substrate, and then they're upset how I redecorated it, and they'll dig themselves. So I think trapdoors are also in that area where they can dig their tunnels.
Amazing. Thanks.
Yeah. Anything else?
Razsa, it sounds like there's a lot of mating going on. So is there a mating season?
It depends on the species, but evidently spring and summer, just because the winter months, it's so cold, it's wet, and spiders are not going to lay eggs around during the winter months, just because they don't want mold to set in on the eggs. So I would just think generally it's spring and summer that they'll mate. However, certain species of females can hold, I think, the sperm for X amount of months. So even if she doesn't lay an egg sac now, she can lay it later next year. And I actually had a black widow for over a year, and I had her on her own. So I don't know if she was exposed to male, but she laid about 6 egg sacs within that year. And each egg sac, I had to destroy it because I didn't want black widows in my house. But it was interesting to see that she could lay that many throughout the year.
How long do spiders live? What's their lifespan?
Oh, it depends. It depends on the species. So some could live up to months, some could live up to years. I know specifically tarantulas, depending on wild versus captivity, they can live anywhere between, if it's a male, anywhere between 4 to 6 years, even 10 if it's in captivity. But if it's out in the wild, males probably only live to adulthood, which is within 4 to 5 years, and the females could live over 20 years easily. So, and that's just with tarantulas, but jumping spiders, I think, are in the same category. They could live long, long years.
Razsa, so I know the tarantula is very large. Are there any other, or I guess, is the size of the spider, I mean, does like access to food affect that, or do the spiders just pretty much grow to be the same size regardless of, you know, where they might be, like anywhere in the world, or like in the United States? Does that have an effect on?
As long as they're eating, they're going to shed their exoskeleton, so they'll get as large as they can as far as their species goes. So for instance, black widows only grow up to a certain point, and then that's it. They'll just keep shedding, but they stay that same size. Depending on how often they eat, they might have to shed their exoskeleton sooner. So it just depends on how much they're eating until they reach adulthood. They'll get to that size, depending on their species. So you're not gonna get like a giant black widow just because it's eating more. It depends on the species size, and it'll stay at that size once it reaches adulthood.
Thanks.
Since they may live more than a year, how do they survive the winter?
So black widows tend to like dense areas and dark areas. So that's why we find them underneath logs or in really dark crevices and corners. I think she only lived a year only because I had her and she was in a controlled climate. Probably in the wild, she probably maybe would have lasted 6 to 8 months. But again, it just depends on the spider species. You also have to put into effect if the spider is native to the area or non-native. So daddy longlegs are actually from Europe, and that's why you find them inside your house, because they're not used to the exterior climate, and they find it more susceptible in living indoors. Whereas if you find a native spider, most likely they'll be outdoors because they're used to that climate zone. So it just depends on how they can live. Again, if it's too cold outside, they can die. I've had spiders where they were juveniles and my adults were okay with 60-degree weather. But then when I went to go check on them the next day, the juveniles were dead because of that weather temperature was too low for them.
Razsa, thank you for doing this. It helps me, and I'm sure all of us, understand you a lot better now.
Ha ha, yeah.
Are the nocturnal versus diurnal spiders, is that simply about their preferred food source?
Yeah, so it's basically what they want to eat. I forgot what the statistics were. I think it's like no matter where you are in your lifetime, there's at least one spider within 5 feet of you, something like that. Again, if they're diurnal and nocturnal, depending on the species, even if it's a tarantula, there's variant species out there, and some are more nocturnal than others, and some are more diurnal than others. So it really just depends on the actual spider and what family they come from.
And I was interested that the SAMO website doesn't have any page for any arthropods.
No, they don't.
I
guess they're not cool enough, and I think I'm the only one that thinks they're cool.
Well, unless people are exposed, they'll never know.
Yeah.
But it covers other topics that we've been talking about here on these Zoom sessions, other arthropods. So they must be interesting and important to the environment.
Yeah.
I think it's important to put something up there then, because people, I know a lot of people who are afraid of spiders, and what, you don't really need to be. And maybe if we knew some more about it, they would just calm down.
Yeah, my biggest drive is to, especially when you're out on the trails, is not to hurt them or damage them or kill them or even their dens. I mean, I've gone on trails where I kind of ruin their webs every once in a while, but I try not to. I try to avoid it. I do have one rule at my house. If I find a spider indoors, I have a catch cup. I catch them and I place them back outside. But my one rule is if they're in the shower with me, I'm sorry, that's too close for comfort. They're going down the drain. But that hardly ever happens. So most likely I just find them in the living room with the other stuff near the windows.
You know, it's quite interesting. Oftentimes I'm not aware of them in the field, but if there's a fog, like a cliff or something, you'll see dozens of them. It's just quite remarkable that I'm not aware of them. And all of a sudden I'm very aware that they're really here all the time.
Yeah, the dew and the moisture, you're able to notice their webs, and so you can see them that way. If you're out at night hiking and you flash your flashlight in the ground near the grasses, if you pay close attention, you could actually see glimmers of little lights looking back at you, and those are their eyes. So I didn't believe that until one night I went hiking with a herpetology group, and they told me that, and sure enough, everywhere I went, there was like these little beady eyes looking at me, and they're just little glares that you see in the grass.
I'll have to look for that. That's interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Razsa, you have a few questions in the chat.
All right.
So Ken was able to answer the one from Mel about, does the silk on funnel spider shelter cause the prey to slide into the funnel or get stuck on the silk? And Ken had replied, they get stuck on the silk. And the other answers below are from Gary, Bonnie, and Greg.
So yeah, the silk is, when they have it on their web, it is sticky. So they want to catch their prey. They don't want it to run off. And so it would be hard for them to slide. However, I'm not going to say it's 100% foolproof, because there are some dens, like ground spiders, the soil of the ground interferes with the stickiness. And so the silk is not as sticky as the spider may want it. And therefore, the insects might be able to trail away that way. But if it's a full-blown funnel web, spider web, or orb weaver web, it's going to be sticky in order to catch their prey that way. And what was the other question, Mike?
There's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the next question is, how toxic is black widow venom?
So it's toxic to the point where it is probably life and death if it were to envenomate a child, an infant, and maybe somebody who's elder. Anybody else, it would be toxic and they would have a severe allergic reaction. But it wouldn't be able to kill somebody on the spot right then and there. It would have to be something that a person would have to ignore, and then they get severely sick from that. So the two most toxic venomous spiders we'd have to look out for in the United States is black widow and brown recluse. However, the brown recluse isn't found in this area, so the only one we have to keep an eye out is the black widow and the brown widow. As long as it has that red hourglass shape on its abdomen, it's a widow. It's part of the widow family, and it's going to have some severe, intense venom inside of it.
Razsa, what is the treatment if you get bitten by a black widow or a brown widow spider?
You have to go to the hospital and see the doctor, and I think they try to give you antibiotics, but I'm not 100% sure. But I don't know if there is an anti-venom, but I do know doctors will try to subside it. Some folks, so what I've read in certain articles is some folks may get severe allergic reactions to any type of spider bite. So it basically depends on the person's biology. And so doctors would get a lot of folks coming in claiming that they were bitten by a black widow when in reality they weren't. They're just having a real severe allergic reaction. So they try, and what they try to tell folks is if you are bitten by a spider and you have the spider there, try to keep it so that it's later identified if it's venomous or not. Again, all spiders are venomous, but the severity of it. So again, we want to pay attention to black widows and brown widows. And then they want, not that doctors are experts, but it's if you're able to identify the bite marks, it might be a little bit easier to see what type of spider bit you.
My wife was bitten on the foot and went to ER, and they said, nothing you can do, you just have to tough it out. And she said it was excruciating.
This was a black widow spider that bit her?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, I think it's severe from what scientists say. It's severe if it were an infant or elderly with prior medical conditions. But as far as us, I think we're safe.
Yeah, there was no indication of a bite. There was no swelling or discoloration.
Oh no.
Nothing at all, and it was incredibly painful.
Yeah, and I don't know. I've seen people hold black widows, and there's videos of guys and girls that have pet black widows, and they'll hold them and they'll crawl all over them, and they won't bite. So they'll only bite if they feel threatened, or if they're like, oh, you don't know I'm here, here I am. And so it just really depends.
Okay.
Liza, do black widows, so if they trap something in their web, do they then bite the prey to kill it, or do they just sort of let it, die in the web or something?
Yeah, I got so excited. So yeah, so the black widow I had, she had a nice thick web, and I would drop mini crickets in there, live crickets, and right away she knew, and she would bite it several times. And then she would wrap it a little bit and then bite it again and wrap it a little bit, and then she would leave it alone. And I think she sensed me, so she wouldn't do anything else. But if I walked away and came back, she was already chomping down on it. So within less than a minute, she would start biting it multiple times and start feasting on the mini cricket.
And actually, just reminds me, do the spiders, I think I remember that some spiders would like bite their prey, inject it with something, it would liquefy its insides and they'd suck it out. Or do some spiders just sort of consume the prey, take bites out of it, that type of thing? Yeah,
so the venom actually does liquefy their inner organs, and so it makes it easier for them to suck it out, munch on it. Depending on the size of prey, I would assume if it's a larger size prey, they would inject it with the venom multiple times to allow that system to break down and make it easier for them to eat it. Whereas something that's smaller than them, they probably won't wait that long. They'll just go for it. So yeah, they will suck it in, and that's where the venom comes in, because it will break down the system inside.
Okay, more chat questions. Do we have any endemic spiders in the Santa Monica Mountains?
Ooh, endemic. Not that I know of. Katie Delaney had an intern that was studying spiders, and that intern no longer works with us. So we don't really have a foolproof research for arthropods or invertebrate or arthropods in our parks. I don't know of any that are endemic. I just know a lot of them are probably common to Southern California.
Are the daddy longlegs you refer to the same as cobweb spiders?
You know what? I had to look at that again. I have a feeling it's a no, but I got to go back to my book and see. I think there was a difference in their body structure that differentiated them, but let me look back on that. So cobwebs, versus daddy long legs. Because I think one of them is the daddy long legs and one of them is the seller spider, and people interchanged the name so much it got them confused. So I'll look into that, whether cobwebs got involved in that naming system. But when I send the email out with this video, I'll have that answer.
The next question is, we frequently have frost and sometimes freezes. Since spiders are not warm-blooded, how do they survive those low temperatures?
So they actually lower their metabolism. Again, they need that. Ground spiders will definitely rely on the silk in their dens to moderate that temperature and the humidity. And also, I think the ground systems, I think the temperature stays at a consistent 60 degrees or 70 degrees, I forgot what, but they're able to live that way. As far as the non-native spiders, so native spiders are used to the climate here, so they'll be more susceptible to colder temperatures such as frost and things like that. They're capable of lowering their metabolism and surviving that. It's the non-natives that do not like that because they're not used to this climate zone, and those are the ones you will find in your house trying to stay warm. So I think the mouse spider is one of them. I want to say the soy spider is another one, and the daddy long legs is definitely the spiders that came from Europe, and so they're not used to this area, and so those are the ones you'll find inside your house.
The next question is, how many species of spiders are there?
I believe, oh man, I think in the Critter Corners I had that exact number up. I think in the United States, it was somewhere around 35,000, and then it was like 300 and something thousand worldwide. But I could give you the definite numbers later.
Okay, next question. We talked about flying, but can spiders swim?
Oh, yes. So I missed that. I had a really cool, I was looking for a video to show, and if I find that video, I will share that as well. There's actually spiders that will use silk to create a bubble, and they actually live underwater, and so they call them submarine spiders. And so they can, if you want to say, I don't know if that would be considered swimming, but they can live underwater.
Nice. Next is, does a spider's web lose stickiness over time, or does it dry out?
It doesn't dry out, but it does biodegrade. So again, depending on the spider species, certain types of silk could last up to 5 to 7 days. And so there's some spiders that have to reconstruct their web. I forgot whose house I was at. I was house sitting for a coworker, and they had a crab spider on the outside of their door, and I would watch it every day. It would recreate its web. So I don't know if it was recreating its web because we were knocking it down with the door, but I don't remember the door being near there, or the simple fact that the silk wasn't as strong, and so it would biodegrade faster, and they would have to reconstruct every day. So I think it depends on the actual spider.
Hey, Razsa, about stickiness in webs, is it really sticky, or is it just the compound, the way it's effectively structured, that makes you think it's sticky?
So basically, it can be sticky. Depending on the spider, they could actually manipulate the formula in their body on how sticky and thick they need the silk to be. And like I said, I have tarantulas, and the webs are sticky. They will stick to you, and it takes a little bit of work to get it off of you. So it depends. However, when my tarantula had her egg sac, I could grab the egg sac with my hand and it wasn't sticky. So she did create a different silk for that.
Razsa, this is Jim. I know snakes, they use the venom for an anti-venom. Is there any program that you know of to do the same, like for the black widow?
No, I don't think there is an anti-venom for them or the brown recluse. And I know in the Midwest, that's a bigger issue because there's far more fatalities with the brown recluse because of that. They still haven't figured out a foolproof anti-venom.
The next chat question is, can you talk about various types of spider webs?
So I think in the beginning of the slide, this may have been a latecomer. Let's see if I go all the way back to, was it here? Shelters. So they could use spider webs for either home or for prey. Scientists have discovered some spiders who use spider webs solely just for hunting. They will not live on the spider web at all. They'll actually live somewhere off on the foliage in the corner somewhere, or even on the ground. And they'll just solely use the web to catch their prey. Other spider webs, like the funnel web spider, they will use it for two purposes. Like I said, they'll funnel their way all the way to the narrow end and live in the narrow end. And then this exposed outer end is what they're using to catch their prey. And again, they're trying to sense even the smallest sense of vibration because they can't hear. They don't have earlobes. They can't hear, and so they sense vibrations through the little hairs on their body, and that's how they're able to catch the prey here. Now there was another one. Let's see. Oops, I don't know why Internet Explorer does that. You might think of these as spider webs, but again, these are nurseries. So they create those silk areas to house their young. And they do look like a spider web, but in reality, they're not. They're just a nursery to host and hold the egg sacs until they're spiderlings and they can venture off on their own. Let's see, my screen's in the way. This is a silk door to a trapdoor spider. So again, it's a ground spider. It's not going to rely on a spider web to live or hunt off of. They use more of an ambush tactic. Again, the orb weave spider, the generic Charlotte's web, if it's laying horizontal, that web is mostly used to catch insects or prey that are falling above into the net. If the web is more vertical, their choice of food is to intercept flying insects. So really, they're the ones manipulating how they want to catch their food. This is not really a spider web, but it is a tunnel where they will hide inside the tunnel and envenomate their prey, and then they'll repatch the hole with silk, and they'll do it all over again until another morsel comes strolling around. That's more of a net, so it's not really a web to live off of, but like again, it just depends on what their needs are. And so again, they create this blanket or this net, and they'll just drop that onto the prey underneath them and ambush them that way. This, I guess you can consider it a spider web. I've seen these, randomly around. It's a triangular web, and this is where he'll pull this over nice and tight, and he'll hang out on this end until he senses a small vibration, and he'll release himself with the strand here and slingshot himself into that. So there's different webs. As far as like webbing, like different species, I could go over that in a different spider series and talk about different webs that certain species have. If that's an interest to any of you, I could work on that. Does that help?
Next question. I'm pretty sure that in the previous training session, you mentioned that some spiders have no eyes. Am I wrong?
Yeah, so I forgot which species it is. There's one with no eyes. They're called, the way that their eyes are placed on their head, the pattern, they're called diodes. And so it may appear that the spider may have 2 eyes, but in reality, the dyad could hold 2, 4, 6 eyes, or maybe 3 eyes here and 3 eyes there. And then they got 2 in the middle. So in reality, they got 3, 6, 8 eyes in total. So it really depends on the species and how the pattern of the eyes are. But there are spiders that do not have eyes.
Okay. Every once in a while, I hear a local person that day that they were bit by a brown recluse. As far as I knew, their range were not in California. Have they moved into our area?
No, so a lot of folks get the huntsman spider confused for the brown recluse and the wolf spider, only because of the shape of their body. They have these long, creepy looking legs that twindle out, and that resembles a lot of the body of the brown recluse. However, their coloration is different. The wolf spider has these brown stripes on the carapace that are really dark, and folks, because they're so far away and they're so fast, it's hard to get a good look at them. And so people automatically assume it's a violin shape, but they're not. It's these 2 dark stripes. So the only brown recluses that are out there have a violin dark shaped symbol on their carapace. I think the University of Riverside has a huge study on brown recluses and other non-native spiders that come into like the Riverside County and LA County. And they said that the probability of them coming over here and taking over the spider population is slim to none. It's not going to happen. They can't survive in these conditions. However, they have had instances where they have discovered 1 or 2 within a year, but it's really low rates. And that's because they're either brought through cargo or folks that traveled from the Midwest over here or moving their boxes or their storage supplies all the way here. But again, not anything to the point where it should scare anybody or put anybody in an uproar that they're gonna come over here and populate and take over the population.
Can spiders regenerate lost limbs?
They can. So they can lose their legs during mating if they, get bit or the female's trying to eat them. Sometimes they lose their legs just by being injured. I've seen at Rancho Sierra Vista, not that I'm putting shade on bicyclists, but I've seen like a tarantula get its leg underneath the tire and the leg fell off. And I know one of our volunteers took that tarantula home to nurse it back. And once that tarantula shed its exoskeleton, it was able to regenerate another leg. So other spider species do the same thing. So they can regenerate their other limbs after they shed their exoskeleton.
Right. Also, people sometimes refer to a brown widow. Is there any such species?
There is brown widows here. And so again, they look like the black widow, but they're brown. They have the red hourglass. There's also a false widow, and they're not venomous. They look just like the brown widow, but they don't have the hourglass. So if you want to be very cautious about widows, you really want to identify the hourglass shape at the abdomen. But there are false widows that unfortunately get killed because they're mistaken for brown widows and black widows, but we do have brown widows in the area.
And so far, the last chat question is, overall, would you consider spiders harmful or beneficial?
Me personally, I think they're beneficial, especially with science, learning about their not only their silk, but their venom. They're learning how it could create, different medicinal purposes to fight cancer and other diseases. And so I think we're, as I don't want to say community, but I think media and especially movies portray them in such a evil and scary way that we just grow up with this idea that they have no importance in our system, and I think they do. Just the fact that science could look at their silk and mimic it and try to reproduce, to produce something that could save.
Oh, I think she lagged out. Well, we're gonna give it like a few minutes and she comes back. Oh, she's back.
I'm back. Sorry.
I was like,
It didn't tell me I was lagged out until you said it, and I was like, "What's going on here?" Sorry about that. But I think the short answer is yeah. I think they're beneficial to us, as far as technology and science and medicinal purposes go.
All right, we have 2 more questions. Do you know about domestic cats eating spiders?
Domestic cats eating spiders. I've read that cats and dogs have been bitten, and they'll have different variants of allergic reactions. I don't know about eating. I'm guessing that's a possibility.
Are there spider species? Oh, go ahead.
I've read that cats in a single day in your neighborhood eat thousands of spiders. That they're one of the major predators of spiders.
Ooh, well, they kill birds too.
Well, I know that. Yeah, I wasn't going to go there.
Thanks. And then right now the question is, are there spider species that feed mostly on other spiders, or do they all have wide variety of things they feed on?
So they're opportunistic as far as if it's smaller than them and they can consume it, they'll try and eat it. There are certain tarantulas or even spiders that could eat baby lizards or even baby birds, depending on the size that they could take. Like I said, they are cannibalistic, so they will eat each other. It's not just the females will eat the males after copulating. They will eat their brothers and sisters and cousins and like whoever's around them. So they will eat other spiders and they will eat other insects. I think the only thing they can't eat is that tarantula hawk. So that's another major predator they have.
Razsa, do all birds eat all spiders? Or I guess sort of weird question. I assume that birds would. I know they eat insects, so I'd assume that spiders would be on their menu.
Yeah, I think they can eat like the smaller guys, and I think they can eat black widows as well, as long as they can find them and peck at them. And like you can eat a venomous spider. You just don't want them to envenomate you by biting you, but you could eat them with their venom inside as long as you don't have any open cuts or anything. But I think birds do eat spiders.
I guess hummingbirds use spider silk in their nest. Is there other birds that use that like that? Do you know?
No, but I could make that into a program and find out.
Great.
All right, and how? Okay, anything else? All right, we got 3 ideas for 3 next spider series.
This little jumping spider on my shoulder here, this was at the Satwiwa parking lot. He was on my truck. That's the rail of my truck. And it ran around and interacted with me for about 5 minutes. I just kept taking pictures. It was so cute.
Nice. Yeah, we have plenty of those at our park. And I even follow the Lucas the Spider videos. All right, so I think we met our mark for an hour. Thank you all for joining us today, and got some really great feedback from you all, and I think we're gonna make about 3 more spider series just from our conversation today, and so I'll work on those for the next one. This video should be available within the next week. And then if you missed out on Tori's Art in the Park session last Thursday, that should be available on YouTube by tomorrow. So I'll send the links out to all that. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Razsa.
Bye.
Thanks much. Have a good day, everyone.
Take care.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, it was great.